Consciousness returned slowly, as if he was rising to the surface through an opaque, viscous liquid. Some part of his mind was methodically marking each stage of this surfacing. The first scrappy general memories. He is sitting in the seat of a spaceship, waiting for something incredibly important to happen. Is he an astronaut? A pilot? A new stage. He's at school, then the flight academy, and then the Open Space Fleet extraterrestrial program training camp. Another one. An older man in uniform shakes his hand and says, "Congratulations, Christian! You are the primary pilot of Contact now." Oh, his name is Christian. Stage. There is a countdown in his headphones. He presses a button. Stage. The universe explodes in his head. Major Frelser. Major Frelser, can you hear me? Stage. A voice from somewhere outside. Christian, how nice to have a name. Struggled to open his eyelids, and a bright light hit his eyes. He had to shut his eyes again and peer cautiously through his lashes. With each new bit of external information, his memory returned, together with awareness of surroundings. A soft, comfortable bed, light-colored walls, and a rack of sophisticated equipment next to the bed. He is in a hospital room. Beside him stood a man in loose but practical clothes, apparently a doctor. "I'm glad you're awake. My name is Dr. Koltsov. I'm your attending physician." He smiled. The smile was pleasant, heartfelt, and friendly. "Although, to tell the truth, there's not much to treat you for. All of your vitals are normal, and the few abnormalities we've seen disappeared as soon as you started to regain consciousness." Christian looked at him and felt the friendliness and care in the doctor's mind. The curve on the screen, which Christian saw out of the corner of his eye, showed an abrupt small peak. Christian instantly felt a slight note of concern in the general background of the doctor's emotions when Koltsov's gaze flickered to the readings of the device. However, the curve immediately returned to the standard amplitude, and the dark tones in the doctor's aura instantly evaporated. "That's an interesting effect," Christian thought. "I guess the psyche must still be acting up after... Oh, damn." His lips parted and moved awkwardly as if they were strangers. "Doctor, tell me," Christian said with difficulty. "What happened to me? Was I unconscious? How long before I was picked up?" Koltsov looked at him thoughtfully. Christian felt again the edges of warm cloud of the doctor's aura darken with the coldness of worry and indecision. "Come on, speak up," Christian thought, and suddenly realized that the coldness had immediately melted away. "Actually, we were thinking of telling you later, when you've settled in a bit," Koltsov said. "But I can see now that this is an unnecessary precaution." He looked intently into Christian's face. "The thing is, after contact with Pilgrim, we lost your ship. Lost it for a long time." For how long?" Christian asked, trying hard to keep the treacherous tremor out of his voice. Dr. Koltsov sighed. 283 years, he said. "It was a great surprise, and a happy one, I can assure you, when your ship suddenly appeared near the moon. We're glad you're alive, but I'm afraid everyone you once knew are gone long ago." The doctor's aura was still full of warm friendliness, But Christian felt a coldness that came from within, from his heart. He wanted to scream, but had no strength. So he just closed his eyes, repeating to himself, "Leave me alone." The blood was rushing in his ears, but not so much that he couldn't hear the doctor's footstep hurrying out of the room. Complete understanding started to come after a few days. Christian had never been religious and didn't believe in mystical nonsense like soul transmigration, astral bodies, and auras. When the object Alpha suddenly appeared on the solar system's outskirts, all sorts of weird cults went crazy. Everyone thought it was the long-awaited Messiah, except for those who believed that the Antichrist came to visit. The name Pilgrim was quickly attached to the object. Christian had thought it was all nonsense and madness. But now he could see people's auras. Moreover, he realized that he could control people by influencing those auras. At first, he was frightened, thinking that he had finally gone mad and could not distinguish reality from the fantasies of a crippled psyche. But then his memories began to return to him. Pilgrim was a colossal object of obvious artificial origin, a giant lens with a constantly changing albedo. That's how it was discovered, because Pilgrim did not emit any radiation except for reflected light, and it seemed that it had no mass. However, it was comparable to Mercury and large satellites of giant planets in size. But when scientists thought of documenting all the changes in Pilgrim's albedo, and it turned out that there was a logical structure in them, it became clear that it was necessary to prepare an expedition. It was unknown where Pilgrim came from. When discovered, it was already in orbit around the Sun, between the orbits of Pluto and Neptune. The first probes were sent to it from the Neptune Gamma orbital base, and the world froze in anticipation, which ended in nothing. After reaching Pilgrim, the probes disappeared. Finally, the scientists finished analyzing Pilgrim's albedo changes, and the stunned world suddenly realized Pilgrim was talking. His message was a single phrase, repeated in all Earth's languages, including even those long dead, and known only to a few specialists. Linguists were ecstatic. Perhaps if they could decipher all the fragments, they would learn what the speech of the Sumerians, ancient Egyptians, and Etruscans really sounded like. But these were minor details, because what mattered was the phrase itself. "I've been waiting for a human." Preparation, approvals, and selection took a lot of time, but much less than if it was some ordinary expedition to the Oort cloud. Contact. Finally, after all those years of waiting and disbelief. As Christian's memory returned, a parallel, much more powerful process was going on in his mind. He was controlling the medical staff almost automatically, playing on their auras as a skilled musician creates a complex melody by touching the piano's keys with seeming ease and carelessness. For the first couple of days, Dr. Koltsov refused to give him access to the latest information, insisting that Christian was still too weak. But by the third day, it took barely perceptible effort on Christian's part to get the doctor to relent. The network access device was a small, palm-sized thin tablet. Text and images were projected as hologram to any convenient point in space. When Christian asked if there wasn't some more private way to surf the net, the doctor explained that most people had special implants in their eyes. Everything was projected directly onto their retinas, but it required surgery and would take some time, so Christian would have to do without them for now. Christian sent Koltsov away. He didn't know if any surveillance had been set up for patients like him, but decided it wasn't that important. If anything, he could always tweak the opinions of those who might not like Major Frelser's behavior. But why should he? He's not doing anything wrong. He just wants to know what's been happening in the world for almost 3 centuries. The first thing he did was to request all information about contact, but he learned nothing new. After approaching Pilgrim, his ship disappeared, as did all the automated probes, and a few hours later, Pilgrim himself disappeared as well. Christian was mourned as a hero by the entire solar system population. No one doubted that the astronaut had died. Pilgrim's visit remained an unsolved mystery, and to this day, scientists have puzzled over the meaning of this visit. Christian's own memories also were vague. In fact, there was only one memory. He flew up close to Pilgrim so that the enormous shimmering lens blocked his view, and then an incredible shock struck him. No, it was more like an indescribable explosion from inside his mind, as if he had traveled to the universe's birthplace and the Big Bang had occurred within his brain. For an elusive instant, it was as if he had become the universe itself, but he had no time to realize it or to be horrified. After that, there was oblivion and complete darkness, immediately replaced by awakening in a hospital room. Only the memory loss and gradual recovery made it seem like the unconsciousness had some subjective duration. For him, the flight to Pilgrim had taken place only a few days ago. Christian began to review the solar system's history in the years since the date of contact. Not much had changed in the human race, he thought. Yes, humans had stopped fighting, learned not to destroy their home planet's ecology, and extensively spread out over the system, building orbital cities. The terraforming project on Mars began about a century ago, but it will take several more centuries before the red planet will be suitable for life without domes. However, humans never made it to the stars. 2 expeditions to Barnard's star had failed, and occasionally there was talk of preparing a new one, but no genuine efforts. The reason was simple. Humanity was still politically fragmented, and instead of pooling efforts and resources, everyone was desperately bargaining and scheming for preferential treatment and benefits for his own nation. Christian scrolled through the databases and directories, only marginally aware that he was absorbing and processing data at a speed that even the best computers had not been capable of in the days of contact. As he built up a complete picture of the world, probably more comprehensive than any human or computer ever had, he saw his future plan of action more and more clearly. Contact with Pilgrim had not been in vain. The mysterious object had given Christian incredible abilities. Christian must use them to help his descendants. It was time for humanity to take a decisive step forward, and he, Major Christian Frelser, had a duty to ensure the success of that step. It didn't take much effort to convince Dr. Koltsov that there was no longer any need to keep Frelser in the hospital. It was done with the slightest touch to the doctor's mental aura. Of course, all the world leaders dreamed of talking to Christian, the man who had been in contact with Pilgrim, as it was an easy way to score good political points. Great. He'll meet with all of them. Let them show off, shake his hand in front of the journalists. He will smile, nod, and quietly do his job. Of course, he can't reveal the truth. At best, he will be put away in the deepest underground bunker with the best intentions to investigate the fantastic phenomenon. At worst, He'll be declared a dangerous criminal with delusions of grandeur. No, he must proceed secretly and carefully. When he was in school, he had read a sci-fi book in which there was this almost eternal robot that could influence people's thoughts, and this robot cared for and protected all of humanity, leading it to prosperity. This is it, the role that awaits Christian. Though he would not last forever, but he hoped that he could do enough to set the right vector of development for mankind. Having changed into a new light suit that the hospital staff had brought him, he went outside and got into a flyer. The first stop on his way would be a meeting with the president of the Pan-European Federation, Anita Jimenez Johnson. Christian smiled and rushed towards his great secret mission. I realize that you're absolutely right, Victor. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I still think we should have told him. Dr. Koltsov looked at the dark-skinned, fair-haired woman sitting across from him. She was thoughtfully fiddling with a tall glass of amber liquid, a fire wine from Mitsar 9. Anita Jimenez had once been his best student. No wonder she'd been the first to support his plan at the World Council despite her doubts. I wish we had that opportunity, Koltsov said. Unfortunately, all estimates show that poor Christian could not take the blow. And we owe him a huge debt. Unpayable debt, must I say. Our plan is the least we can do for him. In fact, if it weren't for him, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. Anita nodded. Talking aloud was a pure formality. Mental communication was faster, easier, and more efficient. But mankind was in no hurry to part with a tool that had made humans intelligent. Intelligent enough to be ready for contact. It was mostly the people over 300 years old, those born before the Pilgrim's contact, who were primarily in the habit of speaking aloud. Mankind never knew what Pilgrim was. A god, a super-evolved sentient species, or some advanced AI built by ancient civilization. He remained in history not as an object, but rather as a turning point, after which the development of civilization went in a completely different direction and at a different speed. And everyone knew what part Major Christian Frelser had played in that. When Pilgrim had taken over Frelser's ship, he had used the pilot's mind as a prototype, studying it as thoroughly as possible, down to the quantum level. Then, based on the data he had obtained, had in some unfathomable way produced a shift in the minds of all humanity. And each person was left with a clear mental imprint of the original specimen, Christian's mind, as a reminder to whose sacrifice they owed their newfound greatness. Frelser was presumed dead until recently, when his ship suddenly appeared in orbit around the moon. But the rescuers who found the unconscious pilot immediately determined that Frelser's mind shift was far weaker than the rest of humanity. The decision was difficult. "Do you think he'll join the next ship to Barnard?" Anita asked. "I'm sure he will. Judging by the manipulation he was trying to make, that's his main goal," Koltsov grinned. "Apart from uniting humanity, of course." "Well, yes," Anita nodded thoughtfully. "He tried to give me two imperatives: to launch a large hyperdrive development program in the Federation, and to start negotiations with the Asian Union and the Western Congregation on a merger. Look, who was it that came up with those stupid names?" Koltsov rubbed his nose in embarrassment. "It was my idea. As a chief regulator of the Project Savior, I had to develop the basic plot for Christian. To be honest, I pulled them from old sci-fi novels." The main thing is that it all sounded convincing to the major. Anita was silent for a moment. Yes, that's probably the main thing, she said finally. I suppose you're right. The truth would have broken him. To be the last simpleton in a world of geniuses, and mortal in a world when no one else dies of old age, Koltsov added. That too. It's such a shame we can't rebuild Christian's genetics. Oh, why Pilgrim hasn't finished rebuilding him? Anita finished her wine in one gulp and set the glass on the table. Well, we have no shortage of volunteers. Everyone wants to give back at least a little of what we owe. You know, Koltsov said, I keep thinking, maybe that was Pilgrim's intention. Not to make us smarter and stronger, not to give us the galaxy, but to teach us the gratitude, Anita finished and looked at the wall screen on which happy Christian Frelser was speaking to another gathering of influential politicians, students of theater studios, and actors of street theaters. The savior of mankind had a lot of work ahead of him. Thee would ensure that.